The inheritance. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in October, delivered by a courier who seemed unusually eager to leave Rebecca's doorstep. The envelope was thick, expensive paper with a name written in elegant script across the front. Inside, she found documents that would change her life forever. Dear MS, Rebecca Hartwell, the letter began, we regret to inform you of the passing of your great-aunt Millicent Blackwood. As a sole surviving relative, you have inherited her estate, including the manor house at 1847 Crescent Hill Road, Millbrook County. Rebecca stared at the letter in confusion. She had never heard of any great-aunt Millicent. Her family tree, as far as she knew, was sparse and well documented. Both her parents had died in a car accident when she was 22, leaving her with no known relatives. Now, at 35, she lived alone in a small apartment, working as a freelance graphic designer. The accompanying documents were legitimate: deed transfers, bank statements, and a substantial inheritance that would allow her to quit her job and live comfortably. But it was the final page that made her hands tremble. A photograph of the manor house, a sprawling Victorian structure with Gothic windows and a wraparound porch that seemed to sag under the weight of decades. What disturbed her most was the woman standing in front of the house. Even in the faded photograph, Rebecca could see the resemblance. The woman, presumably Millicent, had the same dark hair, the same angular cheekbones, the same pale green eyes that Rebecca saw in the mirror every morning. Against a better judgment, Rebecca decided to visit the property. The drive to Millbrook County took 3 hours through increasingly rural landscape. The GPS signal grew weak as she climbed winding mountain roads, and she began to question whether she'd taken a wrong turn. When she finally reached 1847, Crescent Hill Road, the sight of the manor took her breath away. It was larger than the photograph had suggested, looming against the darkening sky like something from a Gothic novel. The Victorian architecture was both beautiful and foreboding, with intricate woodwork that had weathered to a silvery gray. Rebecca parked her car and approached the front door, keys in hand. The porch creaked ominously under her feet, and several of the floorboards felt soft with rot. As she inserted the key into the lock, she noticed scratch marks around the keyhole, as if someone had frantically tried to get in or out. The door opened with a prolonged groan, revealing a foyer that smelled of dust and something else. Something sweet and cloying that made her stomach turn. Afternoon sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting colored shadows across the hardwood floors. Rebecca's footsteps echoed as she explored the first floor. The house was fully furnished, as if Millicent had simply vanished one day, leaving everything behind. In the parlor, she found shelves lined with leather-bound books, their titles in languages she didn't recognize. The kitchen held modern appliances alongside antique copper pots, and the dining room featured a mahogany table set for 12, though it just covered the fine china. It was in the study that Rebecca made her first disturbing discovery. The walls were covered with photographs, dozens of them, spanning what appeared to be several decades. And in every single photograph was the same woman, looking exactly the same age. Rebecca studied them closely, noting the changing fashions and hairstyles of the people around the woman, but Millicent Blackwood appeared unchanged. Even more unsettling were the family trees and genealogical charts scattered across the desk. Rebecca's name appeared on several of them, along with detailed notes about her birth, her parents' death, her education, and her current address. Some entries were in different handwriting, as if multiple people had contributed to the research over many years. As the sun began to set, Rebecca decided to spend the night in the house. She found the master bedroom on the second floor, dominated by a four-poster bed with heavy velvet curtains. The room felt cold despite the October warmth outside, and she noticed that her breath was visible in the air. She had brought an overnight bag, anticipating this possibility. As she unpacked, she discovered a diary on the nightstand, leather-bound and well-worn. The first entry was dated 50 years ago, written in the same elegant script from the letter. October 15th, 1973. The ritual is complete. I have found the key to extending life beyond its natural boundaries. The price is steep, but I am willing to pay it. The family line must continue, and I will ensure it does. Rebecca flipped through the pages, her heart racing as she read entry after entry describing occult practices, blood rituals, and something called the binding. According to the diary, Millicent had discovered a way to cheat death by transferring her essence to blood relatives. But each transfer required the death of the previous vessel. November 3rd, 1985. Poor Margaret never suspected. She thought she was simply visiting her long-lost aunt. The car accident was regrettable but necessary. I have 40 more years in this body before I must find the next. Rebecca's hand shook as she continued reading. Margaret had been her mother's name. According to the diary, Millicent had been orchestrating the deaths of family members for decades, jumping from body to body to maintain her immortality. April 7th, 2010. Rebecca's parents were more challenging than expected. They were suspicious of the sudden contact from Aunt Millicent. I had to arrange something more dramatic. The brake failure was expertly executed, though I regret the necessity. Rebecca is now alone, exactly as planned. The diary entries became more recent, detailing Rebecca's life with disturbing accuracy. Millicent had been watching her, waiting for the right moment to make contact. The final entry was dated just 2 weeks ago, October 1st, 2023. This body is failing faster than expected. The years of hosting multiple souls have taken their toll. I must accelerate the timeline. Rebecca will receive the inheritance letter tomorrow. By Halloween night, the transfer will be complete, and I will live another lifetime in a young, healthy body. Rebecca slammed the diary shut and ran for the door, but it wouldn't budge. The handle turned, but the door remained firmly closed. She tried the windows, but they were sealed shut with what appeared to be iron bars on the inside. As panic set in, she heard footsteps in the hallway outside her room. Slow, deliberate steps approaching the door. A voice called out, her own voice, but with an older, more sinister tone. Rebecca, dear child, there's no need to be frightened. This is simply the natural order of things. Every generation must serve the next, just as I have served the family for over a century. Rebecca pressed herself against the far wall as the doorknob began to turn. In the mirror across the room, she could see her own reflection, but it was wrong somehow. Her eyes were different, ancient and cold, with a knowing smile that she hadn't put there. You see, my day, the voice continued, now seeming to come from inside her own head. The ritual began the moment you set foot in this house. Your blood has been calling to mind for 35 years. I've been so patient, watching you grow, waiting for you to ripen. Rebecca's reflection in the mirror raised its hand in greeting, though Rebecca's own arm remained at her side. The reflection's mouth moved, speaking words that Rebecca could hear in her mind. Don't fight it, dear. I've lived through so many bodies, experienced so many lifetimes. Sarah Blackwood in 1923, then her daughter Margaret in 1954, then Margaret's cousin Eleanor in 1975, then your mother Margaret in 1985, and now you. Each life has added to my knowledge, my power. Rebecca tried to scream, but no sound came out. Her reflection was growing more animated, more solid, while she felt herself becoming lighter, less substantial. She could feel her consciousness being pulled toward the mirror, drawn into the glass-like smoke. The beautiful irony, her reflection continued, is that I really am your great aunt. I've been every woman in your family line for the past 100 years. Your mother's memories live within me, as will yours soon enough. In a way, we'll always be together. Rebecca made one final desperate attempt to break free, throwing herself at the bedroom window. But instead of hitting glass, she passed through it like a spirit, tumbling out into the night air. She fell 2 stories and hit the ground hard, but felt no pain. Looking back at the house, she saw her own body standing in the bedroom window, wearing that ancient, satisfied smile. Millicent had completed the transfer. Rebecca's body was no longer her own. As she watched, her former body began moving through the house, already making plans. Rebecca could hear her thoughts, see through her eyes occasionally. Millicent was planning to sell the house, move back to the city, resume Rebecca's life as if nothing had happened. But Rebecca's spirit remained bound to the property, just as the others had been. In the basement, she found them, dozens of ghostly figures, all previous victims of Millicent's immortality ritual. They welcomed her with sad, knowing eyes. "She'll keep the house," whispered a woman in 1920s clothing. "She always does. And in 30 or 40 years, when that body begins to fail, she'll lair another relative here. The cycle never ends." Rebecca looked around at the assembled spirits, generations of a family, all trapped in this horrible place while Millicent lived their stolen lives. But as she looked closer, she noticed something the others hadn't seen. The ritual that bound them to the house also connected them to each other and to Millicent herself. "What if we don't have to wait?" Rebecca asked. "What if we can turn this connection against her?" The other spirits looked at her with growing hope. For the first time in a century, someone was suggesting they fight back. As Halloween night approached, Rebecca began organizing the trapped souls, teaching them to focus their combined energy. If Millicent could use a supernatural connection to steal bodies, perhaps they could use it to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. The night shift. Detective Marcus Chen had seen enough crime scenes to know when something was deeply wrong, but the warehouse on Pier 47 defied all explanation. 3 security guards had been found dead, but their bodies showed no signs of violence. No wounds, no trauma, no indication of what had killed them. They had simply died, faces frozen in expressions of absolute terror. The warehouse belonged to Meridian Shipping, a company that imported goods from Asia. According to the manifest, the most recent shipment contained furniture, electronics, and artwork. Nothing that should have resulted in 3 unexplained deaths. Marcus walked through the cavernous space, his footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. Rows of shipping containers stretched into the darkness, each one tagged with destination codes and inventory numbers. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows between the towering stacks of crates. Detective Chen, Officer Sarah Martinez approached with a clipboard. "I've got the preliminary report from the coroner. All 3 men died between 2 and 3 a.m. No obvious cause of death, but..." She hesitated. "But what?" The coroner found something unusual. All 3 had elevated levels of adrenaline and cortisol, consistent with extreme fear. But there's something else. Microscopic scratches on their retinas, as if they saw something so bright or intense that it damaged their eyes. Marcus frowned, studying the report. "Any security footage?" "That's the strange part. The cameras malfunctioned around 1:30 a.m. All we have is static until the morning shift found the bodies." As Marcus examined the scene more carefully, he noticed scratch marks on the concrete floor near where the first body had been found. They were deep gouges, as if made by something with incredible strength. But they didn't look like tool marks. They were too organic, too much like claw marks. The warehouse manager, a nervous man named Rebecca, arrived to meet with Marcus. He kept glancing around anxiously as he spoke, as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. The night shift reported strange noises for the past week, Kim explained. Scratching sounds, like something moving inside the containers. But when we checked during the day, everything seemed normal. "What about the most recent shipment?" Marcus asked. "Anything unusual about it?" Kim consulted his tablet, scrolling through shipping records. Container 4471 arrived 5 days ago from Shanghai. Mostly antique furniture and artwork for a private collector in the hills. It's scheduled for delivery tomorrow. "I want to see that container." Kim led Marcus deeper into the warehouse, past rows of identical metal boxes. Container 4471 sat in the back corner, isolated from the others. As they approached, Marcus noticed the temperature seemed to drop noticeably. "Has anyone opened this container since it arrived?" Marcus asked. "No, sir. Company policy is that sealed containers from customs remain locked until delivery. Only the customer has a key code." But as Marcus examined the container more closely, he found scratch marks identical to those on the floor. They covered the interior walls of the container, as if something had been desperately trying to get out, or as if something had been trying to keep something else in. Marcus called for a warrant to open the container, but the process would take hours. As evening approached, he decided to stake out the warehouse himself. If something was happening during the night shift, he wanted to witness it firsthand. He positioned himself in the manager's office, which overlooked the warehouse floor through large windows. Armed with a thermos of coffee and a camera equipped with night vision, Marcus settled in to wait. The first few hours passed uneventfully. The warehouse was eerily quiet, with only the occasional settling sound of metal containers cooling in the night air. Around midnight, Marcus began to question whether he was wasting his time. Then he heard it, a soft scratching sound, barely audible but definitely present. He grabbed his camera and scanned the warehouse floor below. At first, he saw nothing. Then, near container 4471, he noticed something moving. It looked like smoke at first, a dark mist seeping out from under container door. But as Marcus watched through the night vision scope, the mist began to take shape, multiple shapes, writhing and shifting like living shadows. The temperature in the office plummeted. Marcus's breath became visible as the shadows spread across the warehouse floor, moving with purpose toward the front of the building. As they passed under the fluorescent lights, the bulbs flickered and dimmed, as if the shadows were draining energy from everything they touched. Marcus tried to radio for backup, but his radio produced only static. His cell phone showed no signal. Whatever was happening in the warehouse was interfering with electronic devices. Through his camera, Marcus watched the shadows coalesce into more solid forms. They weren't quite human, but they had humanoid shapes, tall, elongated figures with limbs that seemed to stretch and bend in impossible ways. Their faces were vague impressions of features, like sketches drawn in charcoal. One of the shadow figures looked up directly at the office window, as if it could sense Marcus watching. Its face sharpened into focus, revealing hollow eye sockets and a mouth that opened impossibly wide. Marcus stumbled backward, knocking over his chair. When he looked again, all the shadow figures were staring up at him. They began moving toward the office, their forms flowing like liquid across the warehouse floor. Marcus ran for the door, but the handle wouldn't turn. The electronic lock had malfunctioned. Behind him, the office windows began to rattle in their frames. Frost was forming on the glass, spreading in intricate patterns that looked almost like writing in a language he didn't recognize. The shadows were pressing against the windows from outside, their forms becoming more solid and defined. Marcus drew his weapon, though he had no idea whether bullets would affect these creatures. As the glass began to crack under the pressure, he noticed something crucial. The shadows couldn't seem to fully materialize under direct light. The fluorescent fixtures in the office were keeping them at bay, but the shadows were systematically dimming each light by their mere presence. Thinking quickly, Marcus grabbed his flashlight and switched it to its highest setting. When he aimed the beam at the window, the shadows recoiled, their forms becoming wispy and insubstantial again. But there were too many of them, and his flashlight wouldn't last forever. As Marcus played the light back and forth across the windows, buying himself time, he noticed something else. The frost patterns on the glass weren't random. They were definitely writing, and some of the characters looked familiar. He'd seen similar symbols in Chinatown, in the windows of shops that dealt in traditional medicine and spiritual practices. Using his phone's translation while trying to keep the flashlight steady, Marcus managed to decode part of the message: hungry ghosts, bound by contract, seeking vessels. The pieces began falling into place. Container 4471 hadn't just brought antique furniture from Shanghai. It had brought something else, something that had been deliberately shipped to Los Angeles. The scratch marks inside the container weren't from something trying to escape. They were from something that had been imprisoned and was now free. Marcus's flashlight began to dim. The shadows pressed closer to the windows, their faces becoming clearer and more terrifying. He could see their mouths moving, though he heard no sound. They seemed to be speaking in unison, chanting something in a language that predated human civilization. As his light failed completely, Marcus made a desperate decision. He smashed the office's emergency light panel, triggering the backup lighting system. High-intensity LED floods blazed alive throughout the warehouse, bathing everything in brilliant white light. The shadows shrieked, a sound Marcus felt more than heard, vibrating through his bones. They dissolved instantly, retreating back toward container 4471. But Marcus knew this was only a temporary reprieve. The emergency lights would drain the backup batteries within an hour. He managed to get his radio working long enough to call for backup, requesting every available unit and the bomb squad's high-powered lighting equipment. As sirens wailed in the distance, Marcus watched container 4471 carefully. The shadows had retreated inside, but he could see the container rocking slightly, as if something was moving around inside. When the cavalry arrived, they brought enough portable floodlights to illuminate a football stadium. Under the blazing lights, container 4471 appeared normal, just another shipping container filled with furniture and artwork. But when they finally opened it with the customer's authorization, they found something that made even experienced officers step back in shock. Mixing with the legitimate antique furniture were dozens of ancient burial urns, each one cracked open and empty. According to the shipping manifest, these urns weren't supposed to be there. The customer who had ordered the shipment was Dr. Elizabeth Ren, a professor of Asian studies at UCLA who specialized in ancient Chinese funeral practices. When Marcus contacted her, she denied ordering any burial urns and seemed genuinely horrified by what had happened. "Those urns are from the Han Dynasty," she explained over the phone. "They were used to contain the ashes of criminals and outcasts, people who died violent deaths or were executed for terrible crimes. In traditional Chinese belief, such souls become hungry ghosts, forever seeking new bodies to inhabit." How would they end up in a furniture shipment? Marcus asked. "Someone wanted them here," Dr. Ren said quietly, "and they used my research and reputation to get them through customs. Detective Chen, you need to understand, if those urns have been opened, those spirits are now free in Los Angeles. And hungry ghosts don't rest until they find living hosts." Marcus looked back at the warehouse, now blazing with artificial light. The 3 security guards had been the first victims, but they wouldn't be the last. Somewhere in the city, ancient evil was spreading, seeking new vessels for its hunger. As he filed his report, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The shadows had retreated, but they hadn't been destroyed. And when the lights went out again, as they inevitably would, the hungry ghosts would return to feed. The warehouse on Pier 47 was sealed and condemned, but Marcus knew it was too late. The container had been opened, and its contents were now loose in the city. He made a mental note to sleep with every light in his apartment turned on, and to never again work the night shift alone. But even as he told himself the immediate danger had passed, Marcus couldn't forget the moment when all those shadow faces had turned to look directly at him. In their hollow eyes, he had seen recognition. They knew who he was now, and they would be watching for their chance. The night shift at Meridian Shipping was over, but somewhere in Los Angeles, the hungry ghosts were just beginning their hunt.